As I sat in that lifeboat, looking for the vanished ship, I tell you, the ocean, the surface was as smooth as a sheet of glass. Not a ripple, not a wave, absolutely just smooth as could be. But then, that's when I heard it. Coming across that body of water was the sound of people crying for help. A great crescendo of wave of sound came across, people screaming and hollering, save me, please help me. Just, overwhelming the sound, people crying for help. I mean, it touched me. I turned to my fellow passengers in lifeboat number 5 and said, we must go back. We must try and help some people. We have room. But they refused. They would not go back. The fear was that if they did go back, and we tried to rescue people, there would be so many people trying to get into the boat that it would be overwhelmed, it would be swamped, and we would all die. So they refused to go back. Now, don't judge them wrong. It's all easy to say here, high and mighty on dry land. Well, we would have gone back, but you weren't there. You don't know what you would have done. So I don't blame any of them. But as a result, we had to sit there and listen to all those cries for help and felt so helpless. But quickly, the cries diminished in volume. They became fewer and fewer. It seemed like hours that we sat there listening to people crying for help. But in actuality, in that cold of water, they tell me that you can't last more than about 30 minutes. And it was probably that, really. And the cries became weaker and weaker, and fewer, farther apart. And then they stopped. And that silence, that was the worst sound of all. The worst. We sat there all night in that lifeboat. There was some water in the bottom of it. My legs were in ice cold water all night. We didn't say much, we passengers of lifeboat number 5. There were some prayers went up that night, mine included. At one point, I thought I saw a ship on the far horizon, but it may just have been an hallucination. After what is undoubtedly the longest night of my life, finally, in the far east, the sky began to lighten, and fingers of the dawn began to approach. And it got a little lighter, and then a little lighter. Finally, we could see our surroundings. We were adrift in a field of icebergs. Icebergs, that early in the morning, are actually a very pretty sight. Various shades of pink and gray. Not nearly betraying their deadly menace. We looked around. All we saw were icebergs. We saw no floating bodies or anything else whatsoever. But then, as the dawn got a little bit lighter, on the far horizon, we thought we saw smoke. We gazed, and yes, it was true. There was smoke on their right. There was a ship actually headed our way. And we stood in our boats and we screamed and we yelled and we waved our arms. And when they see us, oh, we yelled till we were hoarse. Here we are, here's they. And it came closer and closer. And then we realized it did see us. We were going to be rescued. Lifeboat number 5 was actually one of the first lifeboats to be rescued. As our Savior's ship came closer, I saw its name, the Carpathia. And as it pulled up beside us, they lowered rope ladders, and we could climb up to be saved. My legs were hurt so bad that from all the ice water that I couldn't, and they sent people down to help me. But I was rescued. And then there we were on the deck of the Carpathia. And we would go on and then to the next lifeboat that was drifting, and a rescue would be performed there. Now, I suppose I should have gone below deck to the infirmary or the Carpathia because of my legs, how badly they were, but I couldn't leave. I just stood there on the deck or leaned on the railing and watched as each lifeboat was rescued. And the scene would be the same over and over again. Those that had been rescued, the mothers, the children, they would run to the railing and watch this lifeboat being rescued because surely father's on this one. Surely my husband is on this boat. I know he must, oh, no, not this one, no, but he'll be on the next one for sure, for sure. The scene would be repeated over and over again. The great groans of despair when their loved one wasn't on the boat. And they would be crushed. And then the procedure would be repeated again and again. I think for me, one of the worst things to see was the young brides, the honeymoon, the bride of the honeymoon, as she watched for her husband, her new husband, who would never appear. And a life started so gloriously with so much promise, a life together ended so quickly. Finally, it became clear there were no more boats to be rescued. And this general feeling of crushing despair settled over the passengers of the Titanic. The Carpathia immediately turned around and headed back to its home port of New York City, from whence it had sailed. Now, I will tell you, the passengers on the Carpathia were such wonderful people. I mean, they went, amazing measures to take care of us. They gave us their beds. They gave us clothing. They took care of us. They nursed us. They were such wonderful angels to each and every one of us. On the second day, on our way back to New York City, I was hobbling around the deck, and I came across the Harts. It was Mrs. Hart and little Eva, and I was so excited. I was so glad and happy that they had been rescued. And then I saw the look in their eyes. And I realized that Mr. Hart, Ben, had not been rescued. Mrs. Hart told me that once they reached New York City, they would turn around and return to England. There would be no tobacco shop in Canada. That was not going to happen now. I'm also happy to report that the actress, Dorothy Gibson, and her mother were both rescued. They were also on the Carpathia. I was glad to see them as well. The captain of the Carpathia, a wonderful man by the name Captain Ralston, he allowed the Titanic survivors to make radio messages to loved ones. No news stories, just personal messages to your loved ones. And so I was able to get a hold of my Nick in New York City and let him know that I was among the living, that he should meet me there on the dock and let everyone know that I was safe. So it was on Thursday, April the 18th, we steamed into New York Harbor, and we were met by a flotilla of every ship boat you can imagine. You know, sailboats, tugboats, rowboats, schooner, everything. They all had reporters on them. They all wanted a story, and they were yelling questions to us on the deck. They had those megaphones like cheerleaders use, and they were yelling questions because they were frantic to get the news of the story. I didn't answer any questions. The first stop before we went to the home dock of the Carpathia, she stopped at the dock of the White Star Line. Carpathia was not a White Star ship. We stopped at the dock, the White Star Line, and the lifeboats were offloaded. I want to tell you a couple things about the White Star Line. You can do with it what you want. One thing is a fact. Those lifeboats from the Titanic, the White Star Line painted over the name and used them again. But one of the worst things to me was that the way they treated their crew. You see, the minute the Titanic sank, all wages for every crew member stopped. The ones that perished. Their family got nothing more. No concern, no additional help. Ship sank, your loved one died, no more obligation. But that wasn't the worst. Do you remember me telling you about those 8 musicians? Those 8 wonderful men? Now, by the way, people have asked me, well, what were they playing? What songs were they playing as the ship went down? Because they all went down with the ship. Now, I've heard a lot of people say they were playing Nearer My God to Thee. I never heard that song. That doesn't mean they didn't play it, but I just heard light, soothing music. That's what I heard. But I do know for a fact that all 8 of those gentlemen perished in the disaster. And their wages stopped instantly. Sometime later, their families, mind you, they'd not gotten any more money from White Star. Sometime later, their families got a letter from the White Star Line, and in it was a bill for the uniforms, and a bill for the instruments. Well, those belonged to the White Star Lines, and they wanted their money back. Can you believe that? Unfortunately, those families got together and they got an attorney, and they were able to avoid having to pay that. But the audacity to charge those poor families for uniforms and instruments. At that point, I made my mind up. I will never sail the White Star Line again. You may do what you wish, but you won't be seeing me on any of their ships. After we left the White Star dock, we moved across the bay and we docked at the Carpathia's home dock. And then survivors began to disembark. And on the dock, on the wharf, there was thousands of people waiting, hoping that their loved one was going to be some of the ones of the Titanic survivors that got off the ship. I was one of the last to get off because of my legs. And so I witnessed many joyous reunions. Those were fine. But I also heard the great groan of despair from the thousands of people on the dock when they realized that no more Titanic survivors were getting off. It was crushing. I don't know how he found me. To this day, I don't know how he did it. But I'm just starting down the gangplank, hobbling my way down, and there he was. my neck. Oh, my neck. Stalling straight and tall. He's much taller than I am. Oh, and I run, and he ran to me, and I gave him the biggest hug, and never had anything felt so good in my life as to see my neck standing there. Now I mentioned my legs were in very poor shape because of the exposure to all the cold water. So Nick took me to a hospital there in New York City, St. Vincent's. And there I was diagnosed with incipient gangrene. And the doctor said to me, just, Mr. Daly, if we're going to save your life, we need to amputate both legs at the knees. And I said, I don't think we're going to do that. I said, the good Lord has got me through all this so far. He's not about to forsake me now. And so I refused the amputations. As a result of lots of prayers and lots of good doctoring and care by nurses, I walked out of St. Vincent several weeks later on my own two legs. No, do they hurt every day? Absolutely. But they're mine. I would return to Lima, Peru, to a glorious homecoming with my family. Life is different nowadays, 5 years later. Those 9 children, they used to get on my nerves sometimes. That's one of the reasons why I always look forward to a trip to London every couple of years to get away from them for a little bit. Now I treasure every second with them. There's grandbabies and it's all good. You look at life differently now. I did a lot of reading early on about the disaster, a lot of investigations, a lot of finger pointing as to who did this, who did that, who should have did this, whose fault it was. In the end, it's not going to bring anybody back. I carry with me a newspaper from the Boston area. My son had it. 1,500 people drowned on the Titanic. 1,500. Doesn't matter whose fault it was, they're gone. I quit reading after a while. Politics got in the way. There has been some good come out of it. New laws were passed regarding lifeboats. There were not nearly enough lifeboats on the Titanic for the number of passengers. Even if we could have rescued every person, and almost no second and third class passengers were rescued, but even if we could have rescued every person, there wouldn't have been enough lifeboat space. Law says you must have like a third more of your capacity now. Also started a couple of years ago was the International Ice Patrol. They're out there in the North Atlantic today, as they are every day, patrolling the iceberg lanes, spotting icebergs and radioing their locations to ships, who, by the way, always now must have their radio room manned 24 hours a day, by the way. And they've done much good. And this today, April 15th, 1917, somewhere out there in the North Atlantic, a ship from the International Ice Patrol will lay a wreath on the water about where they think the Titanic went down. So there have been some good things come out of this. They tell me that Dorothy Gibson, the actress, did get back into the movies very quickly. She made a movie only a month later entitled How I Was Saved from the Titanic. One of the advertisings, I am told, was that the fact that in the movie she wore the same dress that she wore the night the Titanic went down. I guess the movie makes her out to be a bit of a heroine, a real save people. I don't know. All I know is when I saw Dorothy and her mother on the deck of the Carpathia, they were just as weak and as scared, terrified as the rest of us. I guess that's Hollywood for you. I didn't see the movie. I didn't see the movie. Today, life is very simple here in Peru. I soak in the hot springs every day for my legs. They hurt. Like I said, they're mine. I enjoy raising vegetables in my garden. I certainly enjoy all my family. Can't wait to spend time with them every day. I like playing solitaire. It's a good, relaxing game. I also play chess by mail with a gentleman over in Spain. I will write him a letter with my move, and I'll mail it to him. And then there will be a letter come back with his move. We correspond that way, one move at a time across the ocean. It takes a long time to play a game of chess when you're doing it that way, let me tell you. But I got time. I got so much time. You know, it's been said when people have near-death experiences that they look at life differently. And that's true. That's true. The sky is bluer, grass is greener. People don't get on my nerves like they used to. It's good. And every day, I am thankful that I'm here. And honestly, every day I ask myself this question: why me? Why did I survive? Am I any different? Am I any better than those 1,500 people who died that night? Absolutely not. I don't know why the good Lord chose to spare me. I know I'm grateful. I appreciate it. And I intend to live my life every second to the fullest, as I hope you will too. I hope it doesn't take a disaster like the Titanic for you to realize how precious life is. Well, that is my story. Peter Daly. Now, I think I just like to think about this time by myself a little bit on the beach. So with that, I will bid you good day. Again, folks, thanks for joining me. The Titanic has been one of my earliest stories that I wrote, and it's still one of the most popular. Everybody loves something about the Titanic. And I hope you enjoyed this true story. If you did, please be so kind as to give me a like, make a comment. And if you haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, Tales from the Heart, the one with the exclamation point, please do so. I would love to have you as a subscriber. I'm told the more likes and comments and subscribers I get, the better it is. So, again, thanks for joining me today. May God bless.